Good evening, friends, and welcome to Sleepy Time Tales, a podcast aimed at helping you to get a good night's sleep. Do you find your mind plagued with the stresses of modern life, especially when the lights are out and you're trying to get a restful night? Does your spinning mind keep you awake? Follow my voice down the path towards a good night's rest. Listen to me tell a story that will keep your mind from wandering to your daytime problems, the ones you can't solve right now and will be easier to solve well rested. Listen to my voice and allow yourself to drift, following the twists and turns of the story, but slowly letting go and drifting into sleep. Before we get on with the show, I'd like to take a couple of minutes of your time and ask for a little bit of support. This show is brought to you by the supporters on Patreon. I'm hearing from more people all the time how valuable they find the show, and those supporters who have the means to help fund it, to keep it going and help me to reach new audiences, are very much appreciated. I'd like to do more episodes and take more time on story selection and writing original stuff that I just can't do right now. So in the long term, I really would love to take this full time, and I can't do it without your help. So if you're making use of Sleepy Time Tales regularly to help you to deal with sleeplessness, and you have the urge to support the show, and most importantly, if you have the means, please check out patreon.com/sleepytimetales, or go to the link in the show notes or go from the website to take a look. This week I'd like to shout out existing patron Chris who upped his pledge, and who shares Sleepy Time Tales with his partner Moya. Insomnia can be lonely because often the people in your life find different things that help them if they also struggle to sleep. So couples sharing the same thing and finding it helpful make me very happy. Well, I'm not happy that you have insomnia, but I'm happy that you have this together. So thanks to both of you, Moya and Chris, for listening, and thank you for the support. But if signing up for something on a monthly basis is a little bit too much or a bit of a strange idea, if you would like to make a once-off contribution, then you can take a look at buymeacoffee.com/sleepytimetales. It's also linked in the show notes. And there you can, well, buy me a coffee without even needing to sign up for the service. Shoutouts go to Nikki and Michaela, who both made very kind contributions over there. And Michaela has asked about annual sort of subscription type things. And I'm looking at some options for that to see if maybe people would like to get the sort of Patreon type benefits, but not have to pay every month. Patreon does offer the service, but I haven't gotten the nod for it yet, so I'm looking at a few other options, and I'll keep you all posted. But while money is handy, because after all, it's how we buy things, another huge way you can help is simply to spread the word. If there is someone in your life who you think will benefit from listening to Sleepy Time Tales, just let them know. If you recommend the show on social media, please make sure to tag me in so that I can see and I can thank you. That's at Sleepy Time Tales on Instagram and or Twitter. Last but not least, of course, I've got to shout out the music, which is Sweet Night and Friends by Kumiku. Their music is available on their website at loyaltyfreakmusic.com. I've linked the website in the show notes as they've got some very cool stuff that they release under various names that I strongly recommend you check out. Thank you for taking these few minutes to listen to me. Let's get back to the show. So what exactly is Sleepy Time Tales? What is it for? It is a strange idea, a podcast that you're supposed to fall asleep to. But lack of sleep is a health crisis in the 21st century, and this is a podcast that is intended to help those that it can to get a restful night. Do you find yourself lying awake at night, with your mind spinning and emotions in turmoil with anxieties of 21st century life? Do you wake up in the middle of the night and find yourself not quite able to doze back off at 3 a.m.? I'm here to help. My name is Dave, and I'm your narrator, here to help you into a restful night. Sleepy Time Tales is intended to be used as a distraction to what keeps you awake at night, or sometimes maybe background noise or even simply company. That's why I make the episodes quite long, so that I'm here for you to help you sleep without any pressure of the end coming. Now, as far as I know, there's a couple of different ways to engage with the show. For me, when I listen to my sleep podcasts at night, I need something to focus on. A story or an event that lets me keep my mind on a specific point, to stop it from spinning out into stress and anxieties. I need something to focus on just enough not to resist the embrace of a night's sleep when it comes for me. The second way that may work for some people is simply to use it as background noise. Some kind of droning dude going on in the background where other people might like the sound of the ocean or the wind in the trees or the sound of rain. But however you engage with the show, it's very important that you don't force sleep. Just keep a light mental grip on the story and allow sleep to come for you. Now obviously I'm hoping that you're asleep before I get to the end of the episode, but it's important that you don't feel pressurized. If this is your first night, it very possibly won't work for you. In fact, I'll say it very likely won't. It'll probably take you a couple of nights to get used to the sound of listening to my voice, or getting used to my accent, or just the strangeness of the idea. Also, maybe one episode isn't long enough. Or maybe you're somebody who your problem isn't going to sleep. Maybe your problem is waking up in the middle of the night. What I recommend, because it's what works for me, is to let the podcast run all night. With the stuff that I listen to, I usually download enough episodes to play through the whole way through the night. And I start on the latest one and I just let them run. Because when 3 a.m. comes and I find myself lying staring at the ceiling, I just pop my earbuds back in and waft back to sleep again. Sometimes even I find myself waking up like 30 minutes or 60 minutes before my alarm goes. And I do the exact same thing. And you may wonder to yourself, wonder to me, Dave, what is the point of getting an extra 30 minutes of sleep? And I've got to tell you, after what sometimes has been a rough night, that last 30 minutes, there's just something about allowing yourself to relax right before the alarm that is just satisfying on a whole new level. But it's very important that whether it's going to sleep or waking up, it's very important that you try to relax. If you're new to the show and prone to late nights lying staring at the ceiling, this will probably seem strange for you. So just give it a chance. Because I'm here to work with you, to create a safe space, a cocoon in which you can curl up and allow nature to take its course. So if you're still with me, thank you for staying. If you're already asleep, we'll chat again soon. And of course, you aren't hearing me, except maybe in a dream. Love Works Wonders by Charlotte M. Brame. Chapter 4. You are going to spoil my life. 2 days had passed since Miss Hastings' arrival. On a beautiful morning, when the sun was shining and the birds were singing in the trees, she sat in the study with an expression of deepest anxiety, of deepest thought on her face. Pauline, with a smile on her lips, sat opposite to her, and there was profound silence. Miss Darrell was the first to break it. "Well," she asked laughingly, "what is your verdict, Miss Hastings?" The elder lady looked at her with a long-drawn, deep sigh. "I have never been so completely puzzled in all my life," she replied. "My dear Pauline, you are the strangest mixture of ignorance and knowledge that I have ever met. You know a great deal, but it is all of the wrong kind. You ought to unlearn all that you have learned." "You admit, then, that I know something?" "Yes, but it would be almost better, perhaps, if you did not. I will tell you how I feel, Pauline. I know nothing of building, but I feel as though I had been placed before a heap of marble, porphyry, and granite, of wood, glass, and iron, and then told from these materials to shape a magnificent palace. I'm at a loss what to do." Miss Darrell laughed with the glee of a child. Her governess, repressing her surprise, continued, You know more in some respects than most educated women. In other and equally essential matters, you know less than a child. You speak French fluently, perfectly. You have read a large number of books in the French language, good, bad, and indifferent, it appears to me. Yet you have no more idea of French grammar or of the idiom or construction of the language than a child. Indeed, I have not. I consider grammar the most stupid of all human inventions. Miss Hastings offered no comment. Again, she continued, you speak good English, but your spelling is bad and your writing worse. You're better acquainted with English literature than I am. That is, you have read more. You have read indiscriminately. Even the titles of some of the books you have read are not admissible. The dark eyes flashed, and the pale, grand face was stirred as though by some sudden emotion. There was a large library in the house where we lived, she explained hurriedly, and I read every book in it. I read from early morning till late at night, and sometimes from night until morning. There was no one to tell me what was right and what was wrong, Miss Hastings. Then, continued the governess, you have written a spirited poem on Anne Boleyn, but you know nothing of English history, neither the dates nor the incidents of a single reign. You have written the half of a story, the scene of which is laid in the tropics, yet of geography you have not the faintest notion. Of matters such as every girl has some idea of biography, of botany, of astronomy, you have not even a glimmer. The chances are that if engaged in conversation with any sensible person, you would equally astonish, first by the clever things you would utter, and then by the utter ignorance you would display. I cannot be flattered, Miss Hastings, Pauline put in, because you humiliate me. Nor can I be humiliated, because you flatter me. But Miss Hastings pursued her criticism steadily. You have not the slightest knowledge of arithmetic. As for knowledge of a higher class, you have none. You are dreadfully deficient. You say that you have read Auguste Comte, but you do not know the answer to the first question in your church catechism. Your education requires beginning all over again. You have never had any settled plan of study, I should imagine. No, I learnt drawing from Jules Lacroix. Talk of talent, Miss Hastings. You should have known him. He was the handsomest artist I ever saw. There was something so picturesque about him. Doubtless, was the dry response, but I think picturesque is not the word to use in such a case. Music, I presume you taught yourself? The girl's whole face brightened, her manner changed. Yes, I taught myself. Poor Papa could not afford to pay for my lessons. Shall I play to you, Miss Hastings? There was a piano in the study, a beautiful and valuable instrument, which Sir Oswald had ordered for his niece. I shall be much pleased to hear you, said Miss Hastings. Pauline Darrell rose and went to the piano. Her face then was as the face of one inspired. She sat down and played a few chords, full, beautiful, and harmonious. I will sing to you, she said. We often went to the opera. Papa, Jules, Louis, and myself. I used to sing everything I heard. This is from Il Puritani. And she sang one of the most beautiful solos in the opera. Her face was magnificent, full, ringing, vibrating with passion. A voice like that, like her face, could hardly be forgotten. But she played and sang entirely after a fashion of her own. Now, Miss Hastings, she said, I will imitate Adelina Patti. Face, voice, manner, all changed. She began one of the far-famed prima donna's most admired songs, and Miss Hastings owed to herself that if she had closed her eyes, she might have believed Madame Patti present. This is a la Christine Nilsson, continued Pauline, and again the imitation was brilliant and perfect. The magnificent voice did not seem to tire, though she sang song after song, and imitated in the most marvelous manner some of the grandest singers of the day. Miss Hastings left her seat and went up to her. "You have a splendid voice, my dear, and a great musical genius. Now tell me, do you know a single note of music?" "Not one," was the quick reply. "You know nothing of the keys, time, or anything else?" "Why should I trouble myself when I could play without learning anything of the kind?" "But that kind of playing, Pauline, although it is very clever, would not do for educated people." "Is it not good enough for them?" she asked serenely. "No. One cannot help admiring it, but any educated person hearing you would detect directly that you did not know your notes." "Would they think much less of me on that account?" she asked, with the same serenity. "Yes. Everyone would think it sad to see so much talent wasted. You must begin to study hard. You must learn to play by note, not by ear, and then all will be well." "You love music, Pauline?" How the beautiful face glowed and the dark eyes shone. "I love it," she said, "because I can put my whole soul into it. There is room for one soul in it. You will be shocked, I know, but that is why I liked Comte's theories, because they filled my mind and gave me so much to think of. Were I in your place, I should try to forget them, Pauline." "You should have seen Sir Oswald's face when I told him I'd read Comte and Darwin. He positively groaned aloud," and she laughed as she remembered his misery. "I feel very much inclined to groan myself," said Miss Hastings. "You shall have theories, or facts, higher, more beautiful, nobler, grander far than any Comte ever dreamed. And now we must begin to work in real earnest." But Pauline Darrell did not move. Her dark eyes were shadowed, her beautiful face grew sullen and determined. "You are going to spoil my life," she said. "Hitherto it has been a glorious life, free, gladsome, and bright. Now you are going to parcel it out. There will be no more sunshiny hours. You are going to reduce me to a kind of machine, to cut off all my beautiful dreams, my lofty thoughts. You want to make me a formal, precise young lady who will laugh, speak, and think by rule." "I want to make you a sensible woman, my dear Pauline," corrected Miss Hastings gravely. "Who is the better or the happier for being so sensible?" demanded Pauline. She paused for a few moments, and then she added suddenly, "Darrell Court and all the wealth of the Darrells are not worth it, Miss Hastings." "Not with what, Pauline?" "Not with the price I must pay." "What is the price?" asked Miss Hastings calmly. "My independence, my freedom of action and thought, my liberty of speech." "Do you seriously value these more highly than all that Sir Oswald could leave you?" "I do, 1,000 times more highly," she replied. Miss Hastings was silent for some minutes, then said, "We must do our best. Suppose we make a compromise. I will give you all the liberty that I honestly can, in every way, and you shall give your attention to the studies I propose. I will make your task as easy as I can for you. Darrell Court is worth a struggle." "Yes," was the half-reluctant reply. "It is worth a struggle, and I will make it." But there was not much hope in the heart of the governess when she commenced her task. Chapter 5. Pauline's Good Points. How often Sir Oswald's simile of the untrained, unpruned, uncultivated vine returned to the mind of Miss Hastings. Pauline Darrell was by nature a genius, a girl of magnificent intellect, a grand, noble, generous being, all untrained. She had in her capabilities of the greatest kind. She could be either the very empress of wickedness or angelic. She was gloriously endowed, but it was impossible to tell how she would develop. There was no moderation in her. She acted always from impulse, and her impulses were quick, warm, and irresistible. If she had been an actress, she would surely have been the very queen of the stage. Her faults were like her virtues, all grand ones. There was nothing trivial, nothing mean, nothing ungenerous about her. She was of a nature likely to be led to the highest criminality or the highest virtue. There could be no medium of mediocre virtue for her. She was full of character, charming even in her wilfulness, but utterly devoid of all small affectations. There was in her the making of a magnificent woman, a great heroine, but nothing could have brought her up to the level of commonplace people. Her character was almost a terrible one in view of the responsibilities attached to it. Grand, daring, original, Pauline was all force, all fire, all passion. Whatever she loved with an intensity almost terrible to witness. There was no middle way in her dislikes. She hated with the fury of hate. She had little patience, little toleration. One of her greatest delights consisted in ruthlessly tearing away the social veil which most people loved to wear. There were times when her grand, pale, passionate beauty seemed to darken and to deepen, and one felt instinctively that it was in her to be cruel, even to fierceness, and again, when her heart was touched and her face softened, one imagined that she might be somewhat akin to the angels. What was to become of such a nature? What was to develop it? What was to train it? If from her infancy Pauline had been under wise and tender guidance, if some mind that she had felt to be superior to her own had influenced her, the certainty is that she would have grown up into a thoughtful, intellectual, talented woman, one whose influence would have been paramount for good, one to whom men would have looked for guidance almost unconsciously to themselves. But her training had been terribly defective. No one had ever controlled her. She had been mistress of her father's house and queen of her little coterie. With her quiet, unerring judgment, she had made her own estimate of the strength, the mind, the intellect of each one with whom she came in contact, and the result was always favorable to herself. She saw no one superior to herself. Then the society in which her father had delighted was the worst possible for her. She reigned supreme over them all, clever, gifted artists, good-natured bohemians, who admired and applauded her, who praised her every word that fell from her lips, who honestly believed her to be one of the marvels of the world, who told her continually that she was one of the most beautiful, most talented, most charming of mortals, who applauded every daring sentiment, instead of telling her plainly what was not orthodox was seldom right. Honest bohemians, who looked upon the child as a wonder and puzzled to think themselves what destiny was high enough for her. Men whose artistic tastes were gratified by the sight of her magnificent loveliness, who had for her the deepest, truest, and highest respect, who never in her presence uttered a syllable that they could not have uttered in the presence of a child. Good-natured bohemians who sometimes had money and sometimes had none, who were always willing to share their last sou with others more needy than themselves, who wore shabby, threadbare coats, but who knew how to respect the pure presence of a pure girl. Pauline had received a kind of education. Her father's friends discussed everything, art, science, politics, and literature in her presence. They discussed the wildest stories, they indulged in unbounded fun and satire. They were of the wittiest, even as they were of the cleverest of men. They ridiculed unmercifully what they were pleased to call the regulations of polite society. They enjoyed unvarnished truth. As a rule, the more disagreeable the truth, the more they delighted in telling it. They scorned all etiquette. They pursued all dandies and belles with terrible sarcasm. They believed in every wild or impossible theory that had ever been started. In fact, though honest as the day, honorable and true, they were about the worst associates a young girl could have had to fit her for the world. The life she had led among them had been one long romance, of which she had been queen. The house in the Rue d'Orme had once been a grand mansion. It was filled with quaint carvings, old tapestry, and the relics of a bygone generation. The rooms were large. Most of them had been turned into studios. Some of the finest of modern pictures came from the house in the Rue d'Orme, although, as a rule, the students who worked there were not wealthy. It was almost amusing to see how this delicate young girl ruled over such society. By one word she commanded those great, generous, unworldly men. With one little white finger upraised, she could beckon them at her will. They had 100 pet names for her. They thought no queen or empress fit to be compared to their old comrade's daughter. She was to be excused if constant flattery and homage had made her believe that she was in some way superior to the rest of the world. When the great change came, when she left the Rue d'Orme for Darrell Court, it was a terrible blow to Pauline to find all this superiority vanish into thin air. In place of admiration and flattery, she heard nothing but reproach and correction. She was given to understand that she was hardly presentable in polite society. She, who had ruled like a queen over scholars and artists. Instead of laughter and applause, grim silence followed her remarks. She read in the faces of those around her that she was not as they were, not of their world. Her whole soul turned longingly to the beautiful, free Bohemian world she had left. The crowning blow of all was when, after studying her carefully for some time, Sir Oswald told her that he feared her manners were against her, that neither in style nor in education was she fitted to be the mistress of Darrell Court. She had submitted passively to the change in her name. She was proud of being a Darrell. She was proud of the grand old race from which she had sprung. But when Sir Oswald had uttered that last speech, she flamed out in fierce, violent passion, which showed him she at least had the true Darrell spirit. There were points in her favour, he admitted. She was magnificently handsome. She had more courage and a high spirit than fall even to the most of men. She was a fearless horsewoman. Indeed, it was only necessary for any pursuit to be dangerous and to require unlimited courage for her instantly to undertake it. Would the balance at last turn in her favour? Would her beauty, her spirits, her daring, her courage outweigh defective education, defective manner, and want of worldly knowledge? Chapter 6. The Progress Made by the Pupil. It was a beautiful afternoon in June. May with its lilac and hawthorn had passed away. The roses were in fairest bloom. Lilies looked like great white stars. The fullness and beauty, the warmth and fragrance of summer were on the face of the land, and everything living rejoiced in it. Pauline had begged that the daily readings might take place under the great cedar tree on the lawn. "If I must be bored by dry historical facts," she said, "let me at least have the lights and shadows on the lawn to look at. The shadow of the trees on the grass is beautiful beyond everything else. Oh, Miss Hastings, why will people write dull histories? I like to fancy all kings heroes and all queens heroines. History leaves us no illusions." "Still," replied the governess, "it teaches us plenty of what you love so much. Truth." The beautiful face grew very serious and thoughtful. "Why are so many truths disagreeable and sad? If I could rule, I would have the world so bright, so fair and glad, everyone so happy. I cannot understand all this undercurrent of sorrow." "Comte did not explain it then, to your satisfaction," said Miss Hastings. "Comte," cried the girl impatiently, "I am not obliged to believe all I read. Once and for all, Miss Hastings, I do not believe in Comte or his fellows. I only read what he wrote because people seem to think it clever to have done so. You know, you must know, that I believe in our great Father. Who would look round on this lovely world and not do so?" Miss Hastings felt more hopeful of the girl then than she had ever felt before. Such strange, wild theories had fallen at times from her lips that it was some consolation to know she still had a child's faith. Then came an interruption in the shape of a footman, with Sir Oswald's compliments, and would the ladies go to the drawing-room? There were visitors. "Who are they?" asked Miss Darrell abruptly. The man replied, "Sir George and Lady Hampton." "I shall not go," said Pauline decidedly. "That woman sickens me with her false airs and silly false graces. I have not patience to talk to her." "Sir Oswald will not be pleased," remonstrated Miss Hastings. "That I cannot help. It is not my fault. I shall not make myself a hypocrite to please Sir Oswald." Society has our duties which must be discharged, and which do not depend upon our liking. We must do our duty, whether we like it or not. "I detest society," was the abrupt reply. "It is all a sham." "Then why not do your best to improve it? That would surely be better than to abuse it." "There is something in that," confessed Miss Darrell slowly. "If we each do our little best toward making the world even ever so little better than we found it," said Miss Hastings, "we shall not have lived in vain." There was a singular grandeur of generosity about the girl. If she saw that she was wrong in any argument or an opinion, she admitted it with the most charming candor. That admission she made now by rising at once to accompany Miss Hastings. The drawing-room at Darrell Court was a magnificent apartment. It had been furnished under the superintendence of the late Lady Darrell, a lady of exquisite taste. It was all white and gold, and white hangings with bullion fringe and gold braids, and white damask with a delicate border of gold. The pictures, the costly statues gleamed in the midst of rich and rare flowers. Graceful ornaments, tall slender vases were filled with the choicest blossoms. The large mirrors with their golden frames were each and all perfect in their way. There was nothing gaudy, brilliant, or dazzling. All was subdued, in perfect good taste and harmony. In this superb room the beauty of Pauline Darrell always showed to great advantage. She was in perfect keeping with its splendor. As she entered now, with the usual half-haughty, half-listless grace, Sir Oswald looked up with admiration plainly expressed on his face. What a queenly mistress she would make for the court, if she would but behave like other people, he thought to himself. And then Lady Hampton rose to greet the girl. "My dear Miss Darrell, I was getting quite impatient. It seems an age since I saw you. Really an age." "It is an exceedingly short one," returned Pauline. "I saw you on Tuesday, Lady Hampton." "Did you? Ah, yes, how could I forget? Ah, my dear child, when you reach my age, when your mind is filled with 100 different matters, you will not have such a good memory as you have now." Lady Hampton was a little overdressed woman. She looked all flowers and furbelows, all ribbons and laces. She was, however, a perfect mistress of all the arts of polite society. She knew exactly what to say and how to say it. She knew when to smile, when to look sympathetic, when to sigh. She was not sincere. She never made the least pretense of being so. Society was her one idea: how to please it, how to win its admiration, how to secure a high position in it. The contrast between the two was remarkable. The young girl with her noble face, her grand soul looking out of her clear dark eyes. Lady Hampton with her artificial smiles, her shifting glances, and would-be charming gestures. Sir Oswald stood by with a courtly smile on his face. "I have some charming news for you," said Lady Hampton. "I am sure you will be pleased to hear it, Miss Darrell." "That will quite depend on what it is like," interposed Pauline honestly. "You dear, droll child. You are so original. You have so much character. I always tell Sir Oswald you are quite different from anyone else." And though her ladyship spoke smilingly, she gave a keen, quiet glance at Sir Oswald's face, in all probability to watch the effect of her words. Oh, well, she continued, I suppose that in your position a little singularity may be permitted. And then she paused, with a bland smile. To what position do you allude? Asked Miss Darrell. Lady Hampton laughed again. She nodded with an air of great penetration. You are cautious, Miss Darrell, but I am forgetting my news. It is this, that my niece, Miss Eleanor Rochford, is coming to visit me. She waited, evidently, for Miss Darrell to make some complimentary reply. Not a word came from the proud lips. And when she comes, I hope, Miss Darrell, that you and she will be great friends. It is rather probable, if I like her, was the frank reply. Sir Oswald looked horrified. Lady Hampton smiled still more sweetly. You are sure to like her. Eleanor is most dearly loved wherever she goes. Is she a sweet creature? Asked Pauline, with such inimitable mimicry that Miss Hastings shuddered, while Sir Oswald turned pale. She is indeed, replied Lady Hampton, who, if she understood the sarcasm, made no sign. With Sir Oswald's permission, I shall bring her to spend a long day with you, Miss Darrell. I shall be charmed, said Sir Oswald. Really delighted, Lady Hampton. You do me great honour indeed. He looked at his niece for some little confirmation of his words, but that young lady appeared too haughty for speech. The word honour seemed to her strangely misapplied. Lady Hampton relaxed none of her graciousness. Her bland suavity continued the same until the end of the visit, and then in some way she contrived to make Miss Hastings understand that she wanted to speak with her. She asked the governess if she would go with her to the carriage, as she wished to consult her about some music. When they were alone, her air and manner changed abruptly. She turned eagerly to her eyes full of sharp, keen curiosity. Can you tell me one thing? She asked. Is Sir Oswald going to make that proud, stupid, illiterate girl his heiress, mistress of Darrell Court? I do not know, replied Miss Hastings. How should I be able to answer such a question? Of course, ask in confidence, only in strict confidence. You understand, Miss Hastings? I understand, was the grave reply. All the county is crying shame on him, said her ladyship. A French painter's daughter? He must be mad to think of such a thing. A girl brought up in the midst of heaven knows what. He never can intend to leave Darrell Court to her. He must leave it to someone, said Miss Hastings. And who has a better right to it than his own sister's child? Let him marry, she suggested hastily. Let him marry and leave it to children of his own. Do you think the county will tolerate such a mistress for Darrell Court? So blunt, so ignorant. Miss Hastings, he must marry. I can only suppose, replied the governess, that he will please himself, Lady Hampton, without any reference to the county. Chapter 7. Captain Langton. June, with its roses and lilies, passed on. The laburnums had all fallen, the lilies had vanished, and still the state of affairs at Darrell Court remained doubtful. Pauline, in many of these respects in which her uncle would fain have her changed, remained unaltered. Indeed, it was not easy to unlearn the teachings of a lifetime. Miss Hastings, more patient and hopeful than Sir Oswald, persevered with infinite tact and discretion. But there were certain peculiarities of which Pauline could not be broken. One was a habit of calling everything by its right name. She had no notion of using any of those polite little fictions society delights in, no matter how harsh, how ugly the word. She did not hesitate to use it. Another peculiarity was that of telling the blunt, plain, abrupt truth, no matter what the cost, no matter who was pained. She tore aside the flimsy veil of society with zest. She spared no one in her almost ruthless denunciations. Her intense scorn for all kinds of polite fiction was somewhat annoying. You need not say that I am engaged, James, she said one day when a lady called whom she disliked. I am not engaged, but I do not care to see Mrs. Camden. Even that bland functionary looked annoyed. Miss Hastings tried to make some compromise. You cannot send such a message as that, Miss Darrell. Pray listen to the reason. Sir Oswald and yourself agreed that she was— Never mind that, hastily interrupted Miss Hastings. You must not hurt anyone's feelings by such a blunt message as that. It is neither polite nor well-bred. I shall never cultivate either politeness or good breeding at the expense of truth. Therefore you had better send the message yourself, Miss Hastings. I will do so, said the governess quietly. I will manage it in such a way as to show Miss Camden that she is not expected to call again, yet so as to not humiliate her before the servants. But remember, not in any sacrifice of truth. Such contests were of daily, almost hourly occurrence. Whether the results would be such a degree of training as to fit the young lady for taking the position she wished to occupy remained doubtful. This is really very satisfactory, said Sir Oswald abruptly one morning as he entered the library, where Miss Hastings awaited him. But, he continued, before I explain myself, let me ask you how you are getting on. What progress are you making with your tiresome pupil? The gentle heart of the governess was grieved to think that she could not give a more satisfactory reply. Little real progress had been made in study, less in manner. There is a mass of splendid material, Sir Oswald, she said, but the difficulty lies in putting it in shape. I am afraid, he observed, people will make remarks, and I've heard more than one doubt expressed as to what kind of hands Darrell Court is likely to fall into should I make Pauline my heiress. You see, she is capable of almost anything. She would turn the place into an asylum. She would transform it into a college for philosophers, a home for needy artists. In fact, anything that might occur to her without the least hesitation. Miss Hastings could not deny it. They were not speaking of a manageable 19th century young lady, but of one to whom no ordinary rules applied, whom no customary measures fitted. I have a letter here, continued Sir Oswald, from Captain Aubrey Langdon, the son of one of my oldest and dearest friends. He proposes to pay me a visit, and, pray, Miss Hastings, pardon me for suggesting such a thing, but I should be so glad if he would fall in love with Pauline. I have an idea that love might educate and develop her more quickly than anything else. Miss Hastings already thought the same thing, but she knew whoever won the love of such a girl as Pauline Darrell would be one of the cleverest of men. I am writing to him to tell him that I hope he will remain with us for a month, and during that time I fervently hope, he may fall in love with my niece. She is beautiful enough. Pardon me again, Miss Hastings, but has she ever spoken to you of love or lovers? No, she is in that respect, as in many others, quite unlike the generality of girls. I've never heard an allusion to such matters from her lips, never once. This fact seemed to Sir Oswald stranger than any other. He had an idea that girls devoted the greater part of their thoughts to such subjects. Do you think, he inquired, that she cared for anyone in Paris? Any of those men, for instance, whom she used to meet at her father's? No, replied Miss Hastings, I do not think so. She is strangely backward in all such respects, although she was brought up entirely among gentlemen. Pardon me, my dear madame, not gentlemen. Members, we will say, of a gentlemanly profession. Sir Oswald took from his gold snuff-box a pinch of most delicately flavoured snuff, and looked as though he thought the very existence of such people a mistake. Any little influence that you may possess over my niece, Miss Hastings, will you kindly use in Captain Langton's favour? Of course, if anything should come of my plan, as I fervently hope there may be, I shall stipulate that the engagement lasts 2 years. During that time, I shall trust to the influence of love to change my niece's character. It was only a fresh complication, one from which Miss Hastings did not expect much. That same day, during dinner, Sir Oswald told his niece of the expected arrival of Captain Langton. "I have seen so few English gentlemen," she remarked, "that he will be a subject of some curiosity to me." "You will find him, that is, if he resembles his father, a high-bred, noble gentleman," said Sir Oswald complacently. "Is he clever?" she asked. "What does he do?" "Do?" repeated Sir Oswald. "I do not understand you." "Does he paint pictures or write books?" "Heaven forbid," cried Sir Oswald proudly. "He's a gentleman." Her face flushed hotly for some minutes, and then the flush died away, leaving her paler than ever. "I consider artists and writers gentlemen," she retorted. "Gentlemen of a far higher stamp than those to whom fortune has given money and nature has denied brains." Another time a sharp argument would have resulted from the throwing down of such a gauntlet. Sir Oswald had something else in view, so he allowed the speech to pass. "It will be a great pleasure for me to see my old friend's son again," he said. "I hope, Pauline, you'll help me to make his visit a pleasant one." "What can I do?" she asked brusquely. "What a question," laughed Sir Oswald. "Say, rather, what can you not do? Talk to him, sing to him. Your voice is magnificent and would give anyone the greatest pleasure. You can ride out with him. If he is a clever, sensible man, I can do all you mention. If not, I shall not trouble myself about him. I never could endure either tiresome or stupid people." "My young friend is not likely to prove either," said Sir Oswald angrily, and Miss Hastings wondered in her heart of what the result of it would be. That same evening, Miss Darrell talked of Captain Langton, weaving many bright fancies concerning him. "I suppose," she said, "that it is not always the most favourable specimens of the English who visit Paris. We used to see such droll caricatures. I like a good caricature above all things. Do you, Miss Hastings?" "When it is good and pains no one," was the sensible reply. The girl turned away with a little impatient sigh. "Your ideas are all colourless," she said sharply. "In England it seems to me that everybody is alike. You have no individuality, no character." "If character means in your sense of the world ill nature, so much the better," rejoined Miss Hastings. "All good-hearted people strive to save each other from pain." "I wonder," said Pauline thoughtfully, "if I shall like Captain Langton. We've been living here quietly enough, but I feel as though some great change were coming. You have no doubt experienced that peculiar sensation which comes over one just before a heavy thunderstorm. I have that strange, half-nervous, half-restless sensation now." "You will try to be amiable, Pauline," put in the governess quietly. "You see that Sir Oswald evidently thinks a great deal of this young friend of his. You will try not to shock your uncle in any way, not to violate those little conventionalities that he respects so much." "I will do my best, but I must be myself, always myself. I cannot assume a false character." "Then let it be your better self," said the governess gently, and for 1 minute Pauline Darrell was touched. "That sweet creature, Lady Hampton's niece, will be here next week," she remarked after a short pause. "What changes will be brought into our lives, I wonder?" Of all the changes possible, least of all she expected the tragedy that afterward happened. Chapter 8. The Introduction. It was a never-to-be-forgotten evening when Captain Langton reached Darrell Court. An evening fair, bright and calm. The sweet southern wind bore the perfume of flowers, the faint ripples of the fountains, the musical song of birds seemed almost to die away on the evening breeze. The sun appeared unwilling to leave the sapphire sky, the flowers unwilling to close. Pauline had lingered over her books until she could remain indoors no longer. Then, by Miss Hastings' desire, she dressed for dinner, which was delayed for an hour, and afterward went into the garden. Most girls would have remembered as they dressed that a handsome young officer was coming. Miss Darrell did not make the least change in her usual toilet. The thin, fine dress of crepe fell in statuesque folds around the splendid figure. The dark hair was drawn back from the beautiful brow and negligently fastened with her favorite silver arrow. The white neck and fair rounded arms gleamed like white marble through the thin folds of crepe. There was not the least attempt at ornament, yet no queen arrayed in royal robes ever looked more lovely. Pauline was a great lover of the picturesque. With a single flower, a solitary knot of ribbon, she could produce an effect which many women would give all their jewels to achieve. Whatever she wore took a kind of royal grace from herself which no other person could impart. Though her dress might be made of the same material as that of others, it never looked the same. On her it appeared like the robes of a queen. As Pauline was passing through the corridor, Miss Hastings met her. The governess looked scrutinizingly at the plain evening dress. It was the same she had worn yesterday. Evidently there was no girlish desire to attract. "Pauline, we have a visitor this evening," said Miss Hastings. "You might add a few flowers to your dress." She passed on with a smile of assent. Almost the first thing that caught her attention out of doors was a large and handsome fuchsia. She gathered a spray of the rich purple and crimson flowers and placed it negligently in her hair. Many women would have stood before the mirror for an hour without producing the same superb effect. Then she placed another spray of the same gorgeous flowers in the bodice of her dress. It was all done without effort, and she would have been the last in the world to suspect how beautiful she looked. Then she went on to the fountain, for the beautiful calm evening had awakened all the poet's soul within her. The grand sensitive nature thrilled, the beautiful poetic mind revelled in this hour of nature's most supreme loveliness. 1,000 bright ideas searched through her heart and brain. 1,000 poetical ideas shaped themselves into words and rose to her lips. So time passed, and she was unconscious of it, until a shadow falling over the great white lilies warned her that someone was near. Looking up quickly, she saw a tall, fair, handsome young man gazing at her, with mingled admiration and surprise. Beside him stood Sir Oswald, courtly, gracious, and evidently on the alert. "Captain Langton," he said, "let me introduce you to my niece, Miss Darrell." Not one feature of the girl's proud, beautiful face moved, but there was some curiosity in her dark eyes. They rested for a minute on the captain's face, and then, with a dreamy look, she glanced over the heads of the white lilies behind him. He was not her ideal, not her hero, evidently. In that one keen, quick glance, she read not only the face, but the heart and soul of the man before her. The captain felt as though he had been subjected to some wonderful microscopic examination. "She's one of those dreadfully shrewd girls that pretend to read faces," he said to himself, while he bowed low before her and replied with enthusiasm to the introduction. "My niece is quite a Darrell," said Sir Oswald proudly. "You see, she has the Darrell face." Again the gallant captain offered some flattering remark, a neatly turned compliment which he considered ought to have brought her down as a skilful shot does a bird. but the dark eyes saw only the lilies, not him. She is proud like all the Darrells, he thought. My father always said they were the proudest race in England. I hope, said Sir Oswald courteously, that you'll enjoy your visit here, Aubrey. Your father was my dearest friend, and it gives me great delight to see you here. I'm sure of it, Sir Oswald. I am equally happy. I cannot see how anyone could be dull for 1 minute in this grand old place. Sir Oswald's face flushed with pleasure, and for the first time the dark eyes slowly left the lilies and looked at the captain. I find not only 1 minute, but many hours in which to be dull, said Pauline. Do you like the country so well? I like Darrell Court, he replied, with a bow that seemed to embrace Sir Oswald, his niece, and all his possessions. You like it? In what way? Asked Pauline, in a terribly downright manner. It is your first visit. You've been here only a few minutes. How can you tell whether you like it? For a few moments Captain Langdon looked slightly confused, and then he rallied. Surely a man of the world was not to be defied by a mere girl. I have seen that at Darrell Court, he said deferentially, which will make the place dear to me while I live. She did not understand him. She was too frank and haughty for a compliment so broad, but Sir Oswald smiled. He is losing no time, thought the stately old baronet. He is falling in love with her, just as I guessed he would. I will leave you, said Sir Oswald, to get better acquainted. Pauline, you will show Captain Langdon the aviary. Yes, she assented carelessly. But will you send Miss Hastings here? She knows the various birds far better than I do. Sir Oswald, with a pleased expression on his face, walked away. So you have an aviary here at the court, Miss Darrell. It seems to me there is nothing wanting here. You do not seem interested. Do you not like birds? Not caged ones, she replied. I love birds almost as though they were living friends, but not the bright plumaged birds in golden cages. They should be free and wild in the woods and forests, filling the summer air with joyous song. I love them well then. You like unrestricted freedom, he observed. I do not merely like it. I deem it an absolute necessity. I should not care for life without it. The captain looked more attentively at her. It was a Darrell face, surely enough. Features of perfect beauty with a soul of fire shining through them. Yes, he said, musingly, cautiously feeling his way. There is but little freedom, true freedom for women. They are bound down by 1,000 narrow laws and observances, caged by 1,000 restraints. There is no power on earth, she returned hastily, that can control thoughts or cage souls. While they are free, it is untrue to say there is no freedom. A breath of wind came and stirred the great white lilies. The gallant captain saw at once they should only lose in arguments with her. Shall we visit the aviary? He asked. And she walked slowly down the path, he following. She is like an empress, he thought. It will be all the more glory for me if I can win such a wife for my own. And on that hopeful, although I suspect slightly vain expression, I'm going to call it a night. As ever, you can find the original on Project Gutenberg at the link in the show notes. Thanks again for joining me on this episode of Sleepy Time Tales, the podcast designed around a bedtime story to help you to get a restful night. New episodes are released every Sunday night to give you something fresh to help you rest in a new week. But make sure to subscribe in whatever service you use so that you get new episodes whenever they come out. A reminder that the music for tonight is Sweet Night and Friends by Kumiko. Check out more of their work on their website, which you'll find linked in the show notes. Good night, and sweet dreams.